Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The land of Verdun lay quiet beneath the setting sun, its fields no longer the vibrant green they once were. The village of Greyhaven, Lucas' home, had turned to rubble. The sky hung heavy with the ash and smoke that swirled up from the wreckage. A few days ago, this had been a bustling, peaceful place, but now, only the dead remained. Lucas stood on a small hill overlooking what had once been his life. The sharp scent of burning wood filled the air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. His heart weighed heavy with grief, but beneath that, something darker simmered: rage. He wasn't the only one who had lost everything to the marauders, but he would be the one to seek vengeance. In the local taverns, old men whispered of a treasure beyond imagination, hidden in the cursed city of the undead. The treasure was said to hold powers beyond human comprehension, powers that could restore what had been taken from him, perhaps even allow him to exact his revenge. But the same whispers carried warnings. No one who entered the city ever returned. Lucas' mind was made up. There was nothing left for him here. He adjusted the worn leather strap of his bag across his chest, his hand resting on the hilt of his father's sword. Without looking back, he began walking, the path to the cursed city stretching out like a shadow before him. The journey took weeks. Lucas traveled through forests where the trees stood twisted and gnarled, their branches blackened as though scorched by fire. The further he ventured from civilization, the more the world seemed to change. Nights grew longer, colder, and filled with unnatural silence. He crossed a stretch of barren plains, where the wind howled like the wails of the dead. On the third week, Lucas encountered a band of travelers at a roadside campfire. Their gear was worn, their faces haggard, but they were seasoned adventurers, the kind who had seen too much and lived to tell the tale. "I hear you're heading toward the city of the undead," one of them, a grizzled man with a missing ear, said as Lucas settled near the fire. Lucas nodded. "I am." The man exchanged a look with his companions. "No one comes back from that place, boy. If you're after the treasure, know this: it's cursed. Whatever you're looking to gain won't be worth what you'll lose." Lucas stared into the flames, unmoved by the warning. "I've already lost everything." The man sighed, shaking his head. "Then maybe you'll fit right in." The adventurers departed the next morning, but Lucas pressed onward, undeterred. The city waited for him. Lucas stood before the gates of the city of the undead, his breath catching at the sight. The city rose from the ground like a skeletal hand reaching toward the heavens, its stone walls blackened and cracked. Thick fog clung to the streets, obscuring the path ahead. The wind that had followed him for days ceased as soon as he crossed the threshold, leaving behind an eerie stillness. He moved cautiously through the streets, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. The city seemed devoid of life, though his instincts told him otherwise. His footsteps echoed in the silence, each one heavier than the last. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, Lucas pressed on, driven by the need to find the treasure that could change his fate. As he wandered deeper into the city, the fog thickened, and the air grew colder. Shapes moved in the mist, and Lucas tensed, drawing his sword. Shadows danced at the edges of his vision, and then, from the darkness, they emerged. The undead. A skeleton clad in rusted armor lunged at him, sword drawn. Lucas parried the blow, feeling the shock of steel on steel reverberate up his arm. He swung his blade, slicing through the skeleton's ribcage, sending it crumbling to the ground. But for everyone he defeated, two more rose from the fog. The fight was relentless, but something about it felt off. The undead didn't seem to fight with hatred or malice. They moved mechanically, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It was as if they had no choice but to fight. Lucas stumbled back, breathless from the battle, when a voice cut through the fog. "Stop. You don't have to fight them." He turned toward the sound, sword raised. A ghostly figure emerged from the mist, a woman, her form shimmering like moonlight on water. She was pale, her eyes deep wells of sorrow, and though her feet hovered just above the ground, she moved with grace. "Who are you?" Lucas demanded, still gripping his weapon. "My name is Maris," she said softly. "I am one of the cursed souls that inhabit this place." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "You're undead?" "I am, but I am not your enemy," Maris replied. "None of us are. We are trapped here, bound by a curse we did not choose. We are not evil, only lost." Lucas hesitated. The undead who had fought him earlier stood motionless, as if waiting for some unseen command. Maris' words unsettled him. He had expected to fight his way through this city, expected monsters and horrors. But this was something else. "Then why attack me?" he asked. "We are compelled by the curse," Maris explained. "It drives us to guard the treasure, though we wish to be freed from it." Lucas slowly lowered his sword. "The treasure, does it really exist?" Maris nodded. "It exists, but it is both a blessing and a curse. The one who seeks it must choose, claim it for power or use it to break the curse that binds us." Lucas frowned. "How did this happen?" Maris floated closer, her voice heavy with sorrow. "The undead king, Alaric, was once a great ruler. His kingdom faced destruction, and in his desperation, he sought out forbidden magic. He made a pact with a necromancer, trading his humanity for the power to protect his people. But the magic twisted, and instead of saving his kingdom, he cursed it. Now, the city is trapped in eternal twilight, and we are bound to guard the treasure for all eternity." Lucas felt a pang of empathy. He, too, had been driven by desperation, by the need to save something that had been lost. But now, faced with the truth, his resolve wavered. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Find the heart of the curse," Maris said. "The undead king still resides within the city, guarding the treasure. He longs for release, but only someone from the outside can break the spell. If you choose to free him, the treasure will be destroyed, but we will be freed as well." Lucas considered her words, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The treasure was his key to revenge, the one thing that could give him the power to reclaim what had been stolen from him. But was it worth sacrificing these souls to achieve his own ends? Maris watched him in silence, as if sensing the turmoil within him. "I know the path to the undead king," she said softly. "If you follow me, I can show you the way." Lucas nodded slowly. "Take me to him." The journey through the city was long and fraught with danger. Maris led Lucas through winding streets, past crumbling towers and ancient ruins. The further they ventured, the darker the city became. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and the fog seemed to close in around them. As they approached the center of the city, Maris told him more about the undead king. Alaric had been a noble man, beloved by his people, but the war that had consumed his kingdom had driven him to madness. In his desperation, he had made a terrible choice, one that had doomed them all. Lucas felt a strange kinship with the fallen king. He, too, had been pushed to the brink, willing to do anything to avenge his family. But now, standing on the precipice of that same dark choice, he wasn't sure if he could go through with it. Finally, they reached the undead king's lair. Lucas stepped into the throne room, his breath catching as the weight of centuries of despair pressed down on him. The room was cavernous, its stone walls covered in a thick layer of dust and decay. Massive pillars lined the path leading to the throne, their surfaces etched with ancient runes that pulsed faintly with a sickly green glow. At the far end of the room sat the undead king, Alaric, upon a towering throne of black stone, his skeletal form draped in the tattered remnants of regal robes. The figure of the undead king was immense, a shadow of the powerful ruler he once had been. His eyes, burning with an unnatural green fire, locked onto Lucas as he approached, the faint clatter of Lucas' boots against the stone floor echoing in the stillness. Lucas felt the weight of his decision more acutely than ever. Alaric's presence radiated an ancient sorrow, but beneath it, there was power, raw, terrifying power. The air thrummed with it, as if the entire room was alive, bound to the will of the undead king. Alaric did not move from his throne, but his voice, hollow and weary, reverberated throughout the chamber. "You come seeking what countless others have sought," Alaric rasped, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 years of suffering. "The treasure. The power to shape the world as you see fit. But power comes with a cost, as I have learned. What is it you truly desire, mortal?" Lucas stopped a few feet from the throne, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, though he knew it would be useless here. "I came for revenge," Lucas replied, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "My home was destroyed, my family killed. I thought the treasure would give me the power to make things right. But now, I'm not so sure." Alaric's eyes narrowed, the green fire in them flickering. "Revenge," he murmured, almost to himself. "It is a powerful motivator. It was revenge that drove me to seek the dark magic that doomed us all. The necromancer promised salvation, but it was a lie. Now I sit here, king of a dead city, bound to this throne for eternity." Lucas could feel the weight of Alaric's words, the regret that had festered for centuries. Maris hovered silently nearby, watching, her spectral form a reminder of the souls that suffered alongside the undead king. "You want to be freed," Lucas said, more a statement than a question. Alaric nodded slowly. "Yes. But to free me is to destroy the treasure you seek. The magic that binds me also guards the treasure. You cannot have both. You must choose, claim the power for yourself, or destroy it and release me, and the souls trapped in this cursed city, from our torment." Lucas' mind raced. The power he had sought for so long was within his grasp, but it came with a price he hadn't anticipated. He had seen the pain in Maris' eyes, the suffering of the souls bound to this place. And now, seeing Alaric, a king broken by his own desperation, Lucas understood the true cost of power. It wasn't just the treasure that was cursed. It was the choice itself. He thought of his family, of Greyhaven, reduced to ash and ruin. The desire for vengeance still burned within him, but it was tempered now by something greater. Could he really condemn these souls to eternal suffering for the sake of his own pain? Could he follow in Alaric's footsteps and risk becoming the very thing he despised? Lucas took a deep breath, his decision clear in his mind. He stepped closer to Alaric, his gaze meeting the hollow eyes of the undead king. "I won't repeat your mistake," Lucas said firmly. "I'll destroy the treasure. I'll free you and the others from this curse." For a moment, Alaric's expression softened, as though a great weight had been lifted from his ancient shoulders. "Then you are wiser than I ever was," he said quietly. "Do what must be done." Maris floated closer, her face a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We've waited so long for someone like you." Lucas nodded, though his heart ached with the gravity of his decision. He drew his sword, not as a weapon, but as a tool to sever the ties that bound Alaric to his throne. The runes etched into the stone flared brighter as Lucas approached, the magic resisting his presence, but he pushed forward. With a single strike, Lucas plunged the blade into the heart of the throne. A shockwave of energy exploded outward, the air crackling with the force of ancient magic breaking apart. The room trembled violently, and the green fire in Alaric's eyes flared brighter for a moment before fading completely. The curse was broken, the throne crumbled into dust beneath Alaric, his skeletal form collapsing as the dark magic that had sustained him for centuries finally dissipated. The walls of the chamber began to crack, the entire city groaning as if it, too, were being freed from its unnatural state. Outside, Lucas could hear the distant cries of the undead as their souls were released, no longer bound to the curse that had imprisoned them. Maris looked at Lucas, tears shimmering in her ethereal eyes. "We're free," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Thank you." Lucas watched as her form began to fade, her spirit finally finding peace. One by one, the souls of the cursed vanished, leaving behind only the ruins of a once great city. The fog lifted, the oppressive weight that had hung over the city for so long dissolving into the clear sky. The city of the undead was no more. Lucas stood alone in the crumbling throne room, the silence overwhelming in the wake of the chaos. He had made his choice, and though it meant giving up the power he had sought, it felt right. The treasure was gone, but so too was the curse that had plagued this place for centuries. He sheathed his sword and made his way out of the ruins, the path ahead clearer than it had been in a long time. The city, once a place of nightmares, was now just another ruin, its secrets buried beneath the rubble. As Lucas walked away, he felt lighter, as though the weight of his past had finally been lifted from his shoulders. He had come seeking revenge, but what he had found was something far greater, peace. The horizon stretched before him, vast and full of possibility. Though Greyhaven was gone, though his family could never be restored, Lucas knew that he had the strength to carry on. He had faced the darkness and made a choice not just for himself, but for those who had suffered long before him. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Lucas smiled, ready to face whatever lay ahead.